Donald Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, says he is responsible for adding a journalist to a group chat of White House officials discussing a plan to attack targets in Yemen. The president says that because the operation went according to that plan, no further action is required. The Democrats say the mere fact sensitive information was shared on the Signal messaging app means Signalgate must be investigated.
US attacks on Houthi rebels in Yemen this month were decisive, according to Donald Trump. The decision by top security officials to discuss plans for the strikes on the messaging app Signal rather than through official channels has sent shockwaves through Washington. The officials also seemed not to realise a journalist had been invited to the group chat. He's the one who broke the story. US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has now admitted he set up the group.
I take responsibility. I built the group.
Okay.
So but look, that's the part that we have to figure out, and that's the part that embarrassing, yes, but Pete and I are veterans. We know these operations. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened.
Waltz stopped short of admitting the chat caused any major security concerns and has Donald Trump's backing.
No, I don't think he should apologize. I think he's doing his best. It's equipment and technology that's not perfect, and probably he won't be using it again.
The White House maintains no classified information was shared, despite the messages describing imminent attacks. Democrats are not convinced.
Putting aside for a moment that classified information should never be discussed over an unclassified system. It's also just mind-boggling to me that all these senior folks were on this line and nobody bothered to even check. Security Hygiene 101. Who are all the names? Who are they? Mr. Chairman,
Top intelligence officials are likely to face further grilling over the group chat when they testify before the House Intelligence Committee on Wednesday.
All right, let's get more from William Glucroft, a US analyst and deputy editor of the Parliament magazine. William, Mike Waltz there somewhat taking responsibility, but then immediately lashing out against the Democrats as well. What do you make of this?
What I found really interesting in sort of what's unfolded since this chat group scandal, or Signalgate, if we get to call it that, since everything gets to be a gate these days, is this sort of two-pronged or two-toned response. You're hearing a very normal reaction to a scandal. We heard claims of responsibility, claims of downplaying the problem, saying it wasn't as big of a deal, that this is a much ado about nothing. And that's something you would hear from any White House under any president of either party. And then you're hearing the very Trumpian response of dismissing and disparaging the media, dismissing and disparaging Democrats, almost using conspiratorial language about this need to sort of destroy these top Trump officials. So I find this very interesting, this Janus, almost this Janus response, where on one hand, it's a very reasonable response of a White House in damage control mode, and the other is sort of very much up in the air, very conspiratorial, very what we hear often from Trump and his people.
Donald Trump, speaking of him, has downplayed the issue, saying, I quote, "The main thing was nothing happened and the attack was totally successful," unquote. I mean, does that give us an indication that perhaps no heads will roll when it comes to Signalgate?
It doesn't seem so. Donald Trump is standing by his people, saying mistakes happen, which is very interesting for the guy who likes to say you're fired, or is famous for knowing for that line, you're fired. But he's sticking with his people. I think the big question is, to what extent will Congress act, even some Republicans that until now have been in lockstep with the Trump administration, even when it comes to sort of the theft of legislative power being consolidated in the executive branch. We are finally seeing even some Republicans criticize the Trump administration's handling of this situation. If that rises or can be maintained, if Democrats and Republicans in Congress can sort of take unified action, then we might see some step-by-step backing away of certain officials, but I think we're still far from that. At the moment, it looks like there will be no serious consequences for anybody involved.
But just taking a step back, William, what does this entire episode, this entire saga tell us about how the administration and senior officials within it generally deal with classified information?
Right. Well, first of all, we're still figuring out if and to what extent and how much classified information was shared over Signal. This is partly a gray zone because as a top US official, you can also determine what is classified and what is not. So there's a bit of an ability to warp reality. What is classified information for one person doesn't have to be classified for another person. There are no hard and fixed rules, and there is an incredible amount of power in the executive branch to be able to decide that. And Donald Trump himself can declassify basically whatever he wants as the US president. That aside, we also just don't know because we don't have the full exchange. Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic did not release it, which he said partly was on the grounds of national security reasons. Yeah, if there is classified information, it's very clear from all sides, from all people involved in and out of government, that Signal is not an approved way of handling classified information. And if that can be determined, if there could be some agreement of facts on the whether and if classified information was shared, then we would take the next step of what consequences there might be.
Now, William, stay with us on the line because I wanted to focus on a particular portion of this entire conversation on a Signal, and this one from Vice President J.D. Vance referring to U.S. plans to hit Houthi forces who had been disrupting international shipping in the Red Sea. He said the following, we'll put it up on the screen now for you all. I quote, "If you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again," unquote. Now, that elicited reaction here in Germany, with several politicians expressing concern about the US leak and what it means for Europe's relations with the Trump administration.
The new US administration is not only imperialistic and a problem for democracy, but also highly unprofessional. The time has finally come for Europe to take care of its own security.
It's not a surprise how they assess Europe and the support for Ukraine, for example. It's damaging the transatlantic cohesion on purpose. So we see on purpose the destruction of a long-lasting friendship and partnership. We Europeans have to assess how to proceed. And what we need is an own strong political will, an own political culture. And we also need to look where we have probably to assess the lines of communications and where we might have to cut them off, because we cannot rely on trustful, secure conversation with the United States in the future.
They are very critical about the European Union generally. They are critical about, parts of them are very critical about our international role. But there's always, and that's the biggest challenge for us, there is some small truth to it that we are not up to par at this point. So to have a dialogue, to have some sort of fair conversation, we need to be on the field as well. And we are working on it, and we are progressing very, very fast. If you compare the situation in Germany and Europe compared to February 22, we are much further, but we are still not there where we should be. And it will be tough with this administration. Don't make any mistakes about this. This is just the beginning. It's got to be real rough.
William, from your vantage point in Brussels, do you see Europe stepping up when it comes to the question of its own security?
Well, this is the decade-long, now 800 billion euro question. If we take Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president's top number seriously about the amount of money that could be unlocked through both public and private financing of defense needs around Europe, around the European Union at least. But yeah, the European Union or NATO's Europe contingent, there's mostly overlap there, but they're exactly the same thing, are years behind in being able to provide for their own defense, their own security. So even if there is the will, it will still take years to catch up to that. And the European Union, we have to acknowledge, first of all, Europe is not the European Union, and the European Union is not a state like the United States is. So there's not unity, there's not a unifying voice there. There's a lot of disagreement within the EU and within Europe's NATO's Europe contingent about just how much to spend, just what needs to be spent on, what the actual threats are. and if it wants to, and in what way, right? The United States can project global power. It is a global power. The European Union is economically a global power, but in terms of security and defense, is a regional power, right? Should it be projecting power into the Red Sea? Should it be projecting power into the region around China, the Indo-Pacific? These are big strategic questions that the EU needs to answer.
William Glucroft, US analyst and deputy editor of the Parliament magazine. Thanks so much.